I just heard
What? What did you hear?
that you're weird.
What are you talking about?
You just told Sarah that you're weird. You just told Sarah that you don't identify as a man or a woman. What?
Yeah, I'm just non-binary.
You see, it's that. That's what makes you weird.
If I'm not normal to you, then clearly you need a lesson. So just sit down and relax, and I'll teach you. So before I start, I just wanted to put emphasis on the fact that non-binary people, transgender people, people of non-traditional genders, and even cisgendered people are all valid in their own identities. This video is not made to put certain people on a pedestal, nor is it to demean others. It's solely educational. What even is non-binary, transgender, etc.? Well, the first thing that we have to do is that we have to look at the difference between the terms sex and gender themselves. Sex is used to define your biological identity. So if you're born male, female, intersex, etc., it's basically the list of biological features that you have if you're born into one of these sexes, and it's very little that you can do to change it aside from different sex change surgeries. However, gender is not the same as sex, because gender is about the person's personal identity. And what I mean by that is that everyone has their own gender identity that doesn't always correspond with their sex, and everyone has their own list of traits or personality traits that they assign to their own gender that they feel like should be represented by their gender. Another good term to include here would be the term cisgender, which means that your gender identity corresponds with the biological sex that you were born with. Most people tend to be cisgender, which is completely fine. Not everybody needs to be a different gender from their original gender. It's strange, however, how society tends to place gender and sex into two separate lists of two separate categories that are listed under traits between masculine and feminine. In an article I read, Kate Hildreth has explained that perhaps sex isn't necessarily a binary, but actually sex is bimodal. Bimodal meaning that there are characteristics that are clustered together to define masculine and feminine. For example, men having facial hair and body hair. Women also are capable of growing facial hair and body hair. If sex was a binary, we wouldn't be able to actually have these traits interconnect with each other, nor would we be able to possibly have intersex people being born. What Hildreth is arguing here is that sex is not on a binary, but actually it's on a spectrum, the same way that gender is, and that the argument that a lot of people say is that, well, how can you have all these genders that have different identities when there are only two sexes? But the reality of it is that it's not like it's two separate specific categories. It's that we're on a line. We're on this graph. We have male and female on opposite ends of the spectrum, and then we have androgynous in the middle, and everybody in society it always ends up being somewhere on that spectrum. Some people who are male tend to lean more into having feminine traits, which pull them closer to the androgynous area of the spectrum, and some females end up being tomboys and they end up going closer to the androgynous and part of the spectrum. And it's natural, but we don't really question it, especially for people who are cisgender, who just tend to show these traits. We only tend to question it when people who actually realize that they aren't just male or female, when they start to speak up about themselves and start trying to create a new gender for themselves because of the fact that that's where they're comfortable in. And I know it's a lot of information, and I'm just compiling a list of information that I've held inside for myself, that I've researched for years and years about even myself, because I'm non-binary and I experience a lot of gender dysphoria, and I have gone through this whole journey. In the beginning, I thought that, oh, maybe I'm just transgender. After, being gay for years and thinking that this isn't enough, I thought that I was transgender, and I was looking up how to get hormones and what to do. But as soon as I started shaving my face, and as soon as I started doing certain things that weren't necessarily correct me, I started to realize that perhaps I don't need to fit this category. Maybe I need to create my own category, or try to define myself in my own definition rather than trying to let another definition define me, such as being transgender. I thought that it was very restrictive, and gender and sex is restrictive in the society. People only want you to be this or that rather than being a mix of everything. And to me, being non-binary is both easy and very difficult. Easy because I'm able to express myself the way that I want to, and difficult because I'm often met with ridicule from people who aren't necessarily understanding of it, or don't want to understand it, or think that it's just not real. And it's very difficult, especially when people have had this traditional mindset that society has built for us, where we have to either be male or female and be restrictive in everything. We have to have separate bathrooms for everybody, solely because of the fact that we are afraid of the unknown. The non-binary gender identity is defined as an individual who is neither man or woman. They don't want to categorize themselves as either, and they tend to express themselves as a mix of both, of traits from both of those sexes. Non-binary individuals may identify as agender, gender fluid, or specifically non-binary. It's really difficult to understand, especially since non-binary, the definition of it, is defined as being what it isn't. And by that I mean that non-binary is only defined by not having being shackled to woman or man. So then a question that comes up often is, well, what can it be? What is it? Where do we go from it? How can you be neither? You have to be something. To sum it up, for me, I think that a non-binary person is an individual whose traits are above the categories that we place for man and women. But I alone shouldn't be the only one to explain this. I think that I'm my own individual with my own opinions that may not be the same for every single non-binary person. So I reached out to multiple non-binary people in order to interview them, including my friend and somebody that I met through online, in order to get a further understanding or further grasp of what non-binary is and to explain it to the audience. So the first person I interviewed was a friend of mine named Roy, and they recently came out as non-binary, I think within the last month, and they have so many different new ideas that I haven't really thought about before.
What is your name, your gender identity, and what are your pronouns?
My name is Roy. I am non-binary, and my pronouns are pretty much anything under the sun.
Okay, perfect. And when did you realize that you weren't aligned with your original gender?
I realized I was not cisgendered, or I'd have to say sophomore year of high school.
And what was the process of that? Like, what did you do when you figured out that you weren't your original gender?
Well, when I figured out that I wasn't cisgendered, I kind of freaked out because I don't live in the most accepting household. It's not like I'm I can't, it's I'm gay, oh no, I'm gonna get hate crimes, but it's there are certain topics that aren't dealt with perfectly here. So it's I thought about how I would express my gender, because that's something I've always taken serious. And then I had to figure out what is going on with me. Am I trans? Am I do I want to be female, or is it something different? And I had to go through this whole process of searching up what non-binary was, because I didn't even know at the time. I thought that was like, I used to be the people that were like, there's like two genders, and I used to be that person. And then it opened up further, and I was like, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, I think that's like a lot of people, because for me, like I used to watch, I think I was like, and definitely like around between 2015 to like 2018, I was definitely more of like the conservative way of thinking when it came to gender and gender identity. I thought that the people that like had different alternative genders were like crazy. I was like,
Mhm.
no, that's insane. Like that's impossible. Like there's only two genders. But I'm kind of like in the same boat as you, where like my family, I mean, we both come from Hispanic homes. So like
Yeah.
it's very difficult because they have very traditional mindsets. So I'm like, so I'll like talk to my mom, and my mom was like, well, are you a woman or are you a man? And I'm like, well, I mean, I don't know, but like I think I'm neither. Like I think I'm just like, I want to express myself the way I want to express myself. Like I don't think I have to align with anything. But yeah.
Yeah.
Did you feel an internal need to make changes towards yourself, or not make any changes?
If I wanted to make changes, I would say externally at first. It was more or less like when I first found out, I was like, well, this just means that I don't have a gender. Whoa, right now, like I wouldn't really do much. But as I like progressively figured out more things and I started to feel more things about my gender, like I started experiencing some sort of body dysmorphia around junior, senior year. And especially when quarantine hit, because that's when I was stuck with just myself and my thoughts. And I had to face several things among gender identity, like my sexuality, traumas, stuff like that. So I'd say like towards this most recent period, I'd say like I do feel the need to like change. Sometimes I wake up and I'm like, oh yeah, I like my body. And sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I wish I had a vagina. And sometimes I wake up, I'm like, wow, I wish I was a Barbie doll with just skin. Like it's just, it's very weird because every day I feel like I want to look different. One day I'm like, I'm gonna wear just sweats and a shirt. And then some days I wanna wear a skirt and like this cardigan right here. So it's like every day is different for me. Like today I'm feeling very femme, while tomorrow I probably might feel masc.
Yeah, me too. Like some days I feel like I need to pop like a little bit of makeup on my face, and then other days I just feel like being very like dirty or just like wearing sweats and not doing
Yeah.
anything. Did you feel like the need to like change your physical appearance or change the way that you dressed was fueled by outside influences? Did you feel like pressure from society?
I don't think I felt any types of pressures to change how I look because at the end of the day, like I did my research, but it never told me what non-binary should be like. It was like I've seen a few people that were like, "Oh, you should look androgynous," but like as I've stated, I don't want to look like that way, you know? That's not something I choose. Well, I, of course, if others want to, they can, and that's their body, that's their gender. For me, I don't really feel that way. And I guess everything that I've led up to me has been all me. Like, I'll ask my friends, like, hey, can I borrow a skirt? Or like, hey, what do you think about this outfit? But other than that, it's always just been like how I've felt. And
So, next question. Where are you now in terms of being satisfied with your identity?
where am I now? I'd say I am satisfied with my identity. I feel like I've come to like not a full stop, but like I'm coming towards the home stretch. Like I feel like I'm like finally figuring out what I want, who I am, where I want to be in regards of gender expression and my gender as a whole. Because I started off as he, him, then I went to he, they, then I went to he, they, it, and then I went to he, she, they, and then now I'm at the point where I'm just like anything.
Yeah. Anything goes.
Literally.
How do you think that we as a society can support NB folk or transgender folk?
Definitely bathroom changes. I think that needs to be employed, and I think safe spaces for people, and that when we turn 18 or even younger, I really wish that, I know in California they do a thing where you can have your gender as X if you're non-binary, something like that. I'd like that to be like nationwide, because it's like I don't, when I sign up for things and I see gender and it's just male, female, I'm like, I look at it, I'm like, and then I put male. Or like if I want to legally change my name, I wish that was easier because you know my dead name, but like some people don't when I introduce them. And then if they get exposed to that, they're like, oh, that's your old name. And then they'll sometimes say it. And I'm like, but you know me as this, so why are you saying it? So it's like things like that.
Yeah, no, it's actually pretty difficult to like, as soon as like someone already knows your dead name, it's really difficult to like get rid of that. I wish it was just easier for someone to like at least change their name, because like the way that it is now, there's just too many documents that you need in order to actually do it. And I think like when you're super young, I think you definitely need like parents' permission to do it, from what I remember. So it's a whole process. I don't know why they do that, but hopefully they're going to like decrease that soon, because there's a lot of people that are like going to change their name. Like I wanted to change my name, but I'm not sure like yet as to what I want. But who knows? Okay, next question. Is there a lesson that is to be learned going through the journey that you went through or are in right now?
Can you restate the question? I need to think.
Yeah, so another way to say it is like, do you think that there's like a lesson that you learned while you were in this process of discovering who you were? Like, is there something that you could teach other people?
I'd say a lesson I learned definitely throughout this process is to stop giving a fuck about what other people think. That's always been one of my things. I've always been I've always kissed up to people, and I've always been like, I want to be this way so this person can like me. But then it got to a point where I was just like, why do I do this? And that was also part of my gender expression, because I was nervous to come out, because I'm like, people aren't going to understand what this is. But then I also had to come to realization that like, why do I care what other people think? Like, if I'm treating myself with respect, then I'm not going to care what they think, because I respect myself. And if they can't respect that, then they're not in my life, period. So I feel like a lot of people don't think that way. They think that they have to be accepted, but it's like, if they aren't accepting you, then they're not in your life, period. Don't deal with them, you know? That's what I hold with everyone. So yeah, the lesson I'd have to say is just stop caring what other people think about you, because you should respect yourself first and foremost.
That's a really good lesson. I mean, I think I had to like struggle through the same exact thing. Like I think I care too much for sure. Especially with the way that I dress, I'm like, oh, I don't want people to like see me in a dress because I feel like exposed. I feel like, or like when I wear my bra, I'm like, should I be happy to wear a bra, or should I be like, should I like get rid of it? I don't know.
No, I like, it took me a long time to be able to walk out in public in a skirt or in that type of clothes. And the minute I did, I got looks, but I didn't care, because I was like, you know what, I feel like good. Like it was the first time in a long time that I felt comfortable, and like I felt like sexy in a way. Like I felt like so in my body, and I was just like, yes, this is it. Like this is me, and like I don't care what anyone else says.
Yeah, I think that's like the same thing that happened to me, because I bought like this overall skirt that was like see-through, and like I don't tend to like wear feminine stuff. Like the only thing I do is like wear a bra and like wear pastel clothes, but other than that, like I don't tend to wear like shapes like that. I don't tend to wear dresses like that at all. And when I put it on for the first time, I was like, wow, this actually feels like really validating. Like it feels really nice, and it feels like I'm in my skin for the first time.
Definitely, yeah.
What do you think society's views are on gender?
Society's views on gender is such a complicated question, because it's like, I feel like there isn't one standard. I feel like it's like so many different opinions, and like they overlap, but like you have your conservatives or people who are like, there's only two genders, you can't be trans. Then you have those people that are like, oh, you can be trans, but there's still only two genders. And then there's the people that are like, oh, gender is so fluid. I've met people that are like, oh, there's only three genders, male, female, non-binary. And it's like, there's so much, like, the thing about this opinion about gender and closing yourself off from the world of like the spectrum of it all is just discomfort, because people are so scared of change and so scared of things they don't understand. So like something like non-binary, it's not cis, it's not what they're used to. So it's not that they're like terrified of it, it's just they don't want to dive into that because they're not going to understand, even though they haven't gotten the chance to try. So it's like I can't really say that society like doesn't care or does care, because I've met so many different people that feel so many different things. So in a way, I'd have to say that it's always changing. It's rapid, it's fluid, it's like, it's there.
Do you think that, like, especially nowadays, do you think that, like, the opinions have been shifting to promote a more, like, safer space for non-binary folk or people that don't hold traditional genders?
Yeah, I would say that nowadays it's safer for non-binary folk. I would say it's safer for trans folk. There's still a lot of rough patches, however, but I do think that it's been getting better, a lot better.
Do you have any closing thoughts? Anything that you want to say to the audience?
Do I have any closing thoughts? I just say, like, I come from a time that I didn't understand it myself, where I made the jokes that were like, oh, I'm attack helicopter. Like, I used to say that all the time in freshman year. I remember making those jokes, and in sophomore year came, and I was like, oh, but confusion. It's non-binary is such, and gender in general is such a fluid and wild spectrum. It's not just one thing. So I feel like blocking your mind from the world of gender is just so, like, you're depriving yourself of such an enriching experience, because, like, yeah, you can be cis, but, like, there's so much more than just being male or female, you know? And it's like, if you don't enable yourself to try to educate and learn about it, or even give it a chance, then of course you're not going to like it, because you don't know anything. You're going in from a negative angle from the get-go, you know? And one of my pet peeves is that when people assume, because they think non-binary is just like, oh, like, screw gender, when it's more or less different for everyone. Because, like, my version of non-binary and who I am might be different for you, and that could go for any gender, from men to female to non-binary, gender fluid, anything. So it's like, it's just different for everyone, and I feel like people just need to allow people to express who they are as a person, because if you take that away from someone, you'd, like, lose half your personality basically right there. So if I had to just say anything as a closing thought, it's just be open and don't assume, because that's the worst thing you could do yourself, because then you just deprive yourself of being educated about something really cool and really neat and really worth life.
After hearing Roy speak, I felt like we had a lot of different ideas that were very much the same. We had a lot of points where we agreed on, and thinking about, like, the way that he spoke, I was kind of agreeing with him in new ways that I didn't think before, especially when he said that not everybody in society is against people that are non-binary or people that are not the traditional genders, but there's still ways to go when it comes to that. There's still a lot of people who aren't as willing to understand us, and that's a really strong point that he gave us. So the next person that I had speak was Sam Lallman, who is someone that I've met online, and they are non-binary, and they were able to give so many different insights, and we had such a great conversation. And honestly, I'm so excited to present their ideas to all of you.
What's your name, your gender identity, and what are your pronouns?
Okay. My name is Sam. My gender identity would be non-binary, and my pronouns are they, them, or she, her.
Okay. When did you realize that you weren't aligned with your original gender?
I realized that I wasn't quite cis or, aligned with the gender I was assigned with, probably as a young child. I would just see the way I would interact with my sisters and other, girls, or just, like, feminine aligned people. And I, like, felt a lot more comfortable in that area, but I kind of, like, pushed that off for years. Kind of one of those, like, that's a worry for another day. And it wasn't until about last year, around 2020, when I really started to, like, see and interact with other people. I had a friend and he came out as trans, and I was like, whoa, that's something that, like, I could do. That's something that I could look into. And so then I finally started doing that self-exploration.
And to continue off of that, like, what did you do once you figured out that you weren't your original gender? What were the first steps that you took?
When I first realized that I wasn't, the gender I was assigned, I freaked out. I got, I kind of just kept it to myself. I kind of like, I really wanted to ease into it, be like, yeah, I'll just like tell like one or two people. And I don't know, I was really terrified at first. I had to like confide in a few people. I didn't believe myself for a while. I was like, no, you're just being weird. You're just, like, you're just a feminine man. Like, that's just, you're just, you just like to dress androgynous or whatever. And that's kind of what I told people for a long time. But it took me a while until I really started to just be like, no, this is normal. This is an average thing.
Yeah, right. I mean, I experienced like the same exact thing where I was kind of like, I kind of had a lot of self-doubt. I had like a lot of internalized like transphobia or
100%.
internalized homophobia. So I was like constantly like, I used to be like uber conservative, like where with Blair White and all that. Like, and I was like, oh, like there's only two genders, blah, blah, blah. And now I'm like finding that I'm like very liberal and very like into like change. But yeah, it's so weird how that happens. You just like go from one opposite end to the other.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is from that internalized transphobia or just queerphobia in general that you have growing up. And I think that's why a lot of people are so, I mean, like, I remember just a few years ago, I was like, I mean, I respect it, but non-binary doesn't make sense. And that to me, that's like the most comfortable label, you know what I mean? And also doing research into, queer theory and things like that, and the history of, gender kind of makes it a little bit more like, oh, okay, this is a normal thing. But yeah, I totally get that internalized, like, you see everyone hating on it. And so, you're like, oh, like I can't be that. So you double down on that.
Yeah, exactly. The next question, did you feel an internal need to make these changes or not make any changes? Like, was all this like power just through you, or was it fueled by outside influences?
Mm-hmm. I definitely think that it is that sorry, I was trouble.
Okay.
I definitely think that I am fueled by outside and inside forces, because I genuinely believe that in order to make changes to how I want to be perceived, there is that level of perception that other people give. You know what I mean? Like if gender hadn't been introduced to different areas of the world, through colonization and through things like that, I might not feel uncomfortable as I do in my body. Versus, while I think the main reason I feel more uncomfortable and have dysphoria is due to the perception of what makes someone a man. But I also believe that I internally decide what I will want to change physically or not change physically anyways. And so I do think it's like a mixture of both and just being self-aware of that.
So where are you now in terms of being satisfied with your identity?
I'm still somewhat on a journey. Like I definitely think I'm still exploring some pronouns and stuff. You know what I mean? I used to be like, oh, all are fine. And now I'm like, maybe not he. And then other days I'm like, So I'm still somewhat looking, but I also don't believe that gender is like a finite, like a destination that I'm going to get to fully. Some people are that way. Some people aren't. I think that's okay. Definitely just trying to look more into finding just different ways to feel more comfortable. But I definitely think I have a lot of great friends and, even some family that is pretty accepting, kind of just where I'm at now. But I definitely think I got a ways to go, but I'm pretty okay with that.
Yeah, I think me too. I like struggle between like realizing like what I feel comfortable with. Like some days I just feel completely femme and I'm like, I only want she, her pronouns or they, them only. And other days I'm like, I dress like a bum and I'm like, I'm only a he. Like,
yeah. Other days it's like, okay, like I don't care. But
Yeah.
Having that fluidity is strange. It's a strange feeling.
Yeah, and it makes it like it kind of like makes your mind be like, are you valid? Like, is this real, or are you just like saying it's real? But
yeah.
Okay. So how can we as a society support NB folk or transgender people?
I definitely think I'm a true believer that visibility is not enough for actually having society help non-binary and trans people. I think we need full liberation. I think we need to be seen fully on an equal playing field. We need to have full rights, healthcare rights, and things like that other people do that are cis. I generally want full liberation. I don't want to just be seen in society like, okay, trans people exist. Yeah, well, I don't really exist until I am seen on an equal playing field as you. Until I am seen in a way where, gender is completely societal, and I am going, and I'm comfortable that in the gender I have, but it is something that we have created as society, and I want you to accept that and not think of me as an other. I just want to be treated like a person, I guess. You know what I mean? When a cis person, goes around, their identity is not definitive of who they are. You just treat them as a person, and I think having that is the core of what I really want.
That's actually really like eye-opening, because like cisgender people don't have to like justify themselves in their gender, because like that's considered traditional or the norm, when everything should be considered like the norm. Yeah. I mean, the only reason that they think of it as traditional is because we have a very Eurocentric view of gender. You know what I mean? In other places, especially in colonized, areas, they were like, why do you have such a strict view on what a man and a woman is? You know what I mean? To us, it's just a body part difference, not a whole personality difference. You know what I mean? And I want that type of society, in a way of where the difference is purely aesthetics and body parts, and not I'm a whole different being because I have a penis. You know what I mean? I can be just as much a woman or just a person as anyone else. Is there a lesson that is to be learned from you having gone through that journey, or the journey that you are in right now? Is there something that you could teach people right now?
I definitely would want my gender journey, to teach people that there is no right way to be, out of the binary. There is no, it is not a third gender. It is the lack of falling into this very strict binary that was created by an oppressing class. And I want to be able to let people know that you could be, your own little category of, I feel like a woman one day of the year, and I'd be like, okay, I support that fully. I don't care how out of the box it is. You know what I mean? It's all you, and it's all personal. And that is something that is hard to grasp. You know what I mean? Even as non-binary, or even a lot of trans people on the binary, you know what I mean? Their lack of comfort with out of the box trans or non-binary identities, I think comes from an internalized fear of how they'll be perceived by the cis world. So
that's actually like a really good lesson to learn. No, yeah, I kind of like,
It's a
I
hard
really
one.
agree. No, yeah,
it's one I'm still learning. I mean, I'm kind of,
yeah, it's really difficult because I tend to like categorize myself. So like,
because that's what they want. That's what makes them more comfortable. I mean, you think it's like they were against, any queer person. They're like, okay, white cis men who are married is fine. And then they're like, okay, white lesbians are fine. They're like, okay, fine. Trans people, if they're in the binary, are fine. And it's like, they're gonna keep edging us like that. You might as well just be like, okay, I'm going to be fully abstract in my gender. Who cares? I'm not going to do this I'm not going to do this so I'm perceived comfortably in cis eyes.
next question: what do you think society's views are on gender?
I definitely think societies, especially, living in the States and stuff, is starting to progress a little, but I still think that people, whether consciously or not, view gender as an intrinsic part of being a person. While in my belief and in my research and studying, and just in my own personal life, gender is something that is interpersonal. It is, society, it's like something that is due to me as a person combined with the community that I'm around. In the community that I'm around, the way that they've set up gender makes me feel a specific way about my non-binary identity. While if the society was super duper lax about gender, I might not even give it a first or second thought. So I definitely think that we still believe as gender as an intrinsic thing that, you're a man and you're a woman because of this intrinsic part of your body or your brain or your penis or whatever. And I think that is the number one most harmful thing, because then they're like, well, how can you be this? That's not intrinsic to your blah, blah, blah. How can you be, non-binary? That's not, because they still believe of gender as like a physical thing that is a part of the body, whether in the brain or the body itself.
Yeah, right. I agree. Like, I think secondary sex characteristics should be like tossed to the side, and more so just like gender expression, gender identity should be like more valued to people. But I think that people just like are too close-minded and traditional to like realistically think that way. Like even before I recognized that I was non-binary, I was like, this is no way that non-binary is like a real thing, because I was like, it's impossible. You have to express yourself as some sort of identity, and like yeah, you can, but that doesn't mean that like you have to. So
I mean, my definition of gender, the way that I like to put it, is like, it is in the society that we have now, gender is when we give these people certain body parts, whether primary or secondary sex characteristics, and we give those, or we put those on a pedestal above all other body parts, and we have that determine how we perceive those people. When I believe that we should treat those body parts just as anything else. You know what I mean? Would you treat it, because I have 2 left feet and someone else has 2 right feet, would you treat them differently, or think, okay, well, I'm going to call you and perceive you as a whole different type of being almost? No, you wouldn't do that. And I think it should be the same for body parts, for penis, breasts, and things like that, long hair and other things as well that are purely aesthetic. Those are just parts of the body, and gender is just your identity, and gender is your expression, and it's your performance that you are comfortable with. You know what I mean? That is a personal identity to you, and it is not something that you are given. It is something that you create almost. You know what I mean? And I don't want to say that in a way of like, okay, well, you choose to be trans, because I don't think that's true. You know what I mean? I think, you are trans because you, as a human being, you don't fit in the binary that they have given you. But that isn't to say that being, trans is like a physical thing, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, that makes sense.
It's complex, because I truly believe that, if I grew up in a society where gender wasn't even thought of as a thing, I wouldn't feel uncomfortable in my body. I wouldn't feel dysphoria, at least to the degree that I feel it, due to the society around me. It's kind of that nature versus nurture argument almost. But I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's like a lot of society's pressures upon like especially transgender people and non-binary people. Like you see, I mean, nowadays, like it's great that we have like a lot of representation, a lot more than before, at least in media. Like people like Nikita Dragon, who set up like very unrealistic standards for transgender bodies. Or people like Blair White that also do the same exact thing and also try to train us as like how we should think about transgender rights and issues, like how we should like be all right with like not being as respected as we should be. But yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure from like everywhere and from society, and that if that wasn't there like today, I don't feel like, or as valued as it is today, I don't feel like people would be as stressed out about what they identify with.
Exactly. I think that's what I'm trying to say is like, the reason that I am trans is like a mix of who I am as a human being and what society deems as a man, a woman, a non-binary person. And those things working together is what causes my identity. while I still think I would be who I am today, you know what I mean? Feminine, fun, comfortable in certain ways and expression. But if society didn't value, or not even value, but put those things on a pedestal of what a feminine man or a masculine person is, or, you know what I mean? If that wasn't something that was in our society, I wouldn't feel othered. And that's just it, is I think that I am forced to be othered because my identity is seen as not matching up with someone who has a penis.
Yeah, it's true. It's like we're like put into like a separate category, and like we're kind of looked at as like lunatics. Like
Yeah.
we see people like, I mean, I don't know if you remember, but there was like a non-binary person named Milo back like 5-6 years ago on YouTube, and
Mhm.
they were completely like thrown out of the YouTube scape because of the fact that they kept preaching about that there was like 76 genders.
Mhm.
And I felt like, and at the time I thought it was justified because I just thought it was like, oh, like that makes sense because they don't make any sense, so like we
Mhm.
might as well like push them away because they're not adding anything to a conversation. But they were the reason why we have such a big conversation going on right now, because they created such a divide with it between people that of extremely different opinions. And I feel like their opinion was never respected enough, and they never like got through anywhere. Like they basically were like forced out of YouTube. Like they can't build a career off
Yeah.
of YouTube anymore because of their history, which is really unfortunate.
Yeah, I think that's another thing too, is like I notice a lot of people, they try with that whole 76, 70, those types of genders. That's all what it is. I think of it as, since gender is, spectral. It is like, there's a man and a woman, and there's in between, there's outside the box, and all these things. Like, again, because gender is identity, there's gender identity and there's expression, and it's just complex. And so people try to put points on those lines, okay, there's 3 points, or no, there's 70 points on the line. And I think we need to understand its fluidity, and it's spectralness. And I think that is also I think that is kind of what a lot of people, especially back in those days, didn't fully quite know how to articulate. And so, saying gender's a spectrum, I think makes more sense. But I definitely think that is kind of what a lot of people were trying to get at, is like, there's 76 genders because, gender is not part of the body, but it's really, there's technically an infinite amount. I think, I don't know if this was just a little tangent, I guess, but but
No,
that's
yeah.
just kind of how I view it, is like a lot of those people got pushed away because they were just trying to express something that we didn't quite have the language for yet, and were just seen as, oh, you're a lunatic, you're crazy, when they were on the right path.
Yeah, that's completely right. Like I think we have like the same exact opinion on that completely. I don't understand, like, it's just society, man. Society's fucked. Okay, last question. Do you have any closing thoughts?
All right, I definitely think, as like a closing out, is just the fact that no identity that you believe is not valuable, and it is not deserving of full liberation within society. You know what I mean? If you, no matter who you are or who you feel or what you want to express and identify, there is no reason for any reactionary or any movement against that is justified. There is no justifying in not letting you be who you are. And that sounds a little corny, but if you really got to understand it, is like, there was, trans people weren't even, and gay people were seen as having disabilities for years. They were seen as being crazy, as being pedophiles. And to this day, some people still believe that. And I think that kind of sentiment extends as where we scratch, okay, so gay people are okay, so lesbians and trans people are okay, non-binary people and all these other outside the box identities should be gay and liberated as well. And I believe that, we are not free until everyone is free, type of thing. I just don't want anyone to feel like, because it doesn't fit in the binary or in the narrative that we are okay with today, that doesn't mean that you're making it up or that you're crazy, because there have been queer people and people who broke these boundaries for thousands and probably millions of years of human history. So I don't know, just accept it. You're cool. You're cool for your neo pronouns, and you're cool for thinking, you know, for not aligning to any gender, and you're cool for, you know, expressing that in a way, especially in a world or that is a little bit, you know, a little bit weary of that. They're a little bit afraid. So thank you for not being afraid, people. Or if you are afraid, thank you for pushing through, because I'm afraid.
Sam and I had agreed on so many different points, and they really did open up my eyes to the issues that we have in the society, where we have so many different focuses on things that don't really matter, which is, especially now regarding our own issue with gender, is just the issue of gender in this country, which is that we focus too heavily on it. We think it's too important, and we try to categorize every single sex that we see. Males have to be masculine, they have to be strong, they have to be emotionless, they're very violent, and all that sort of thing. And women, they have to be soft, they have to be caregivers, they have to cook food, they have to do this and that and the third. And what the reality is that those are just roles that we placed on each other, and society has been so used to that we haven't been able to grow out of it and allow people to express themselves completely, which is why we're having this conversation. Back then, we never had to have this conversation. People in Greece and Rome didn't have to go ahead and talk about why they were this gender or why they expressed themselves in a certain way. They never had to. It was just what they wanted to do, and that's what they were as individual people. But in this society, we are inclined to, we have to talk about it, and it becomes a politicized issue that for so many is impossible to get through. A lot of people don't believe that we're actually real people. A lot of them think that we're just people that want to be transgender, or are confused about the definition of transgender, or just not even transgender, that we're just the gender that our sex was. For me, if a lot of people would just look at me and probably just assume that, oh, that's just a guy and I can't be anything else but that. A lot of conservative people also believe the same, are even more extreme in that regard, where they will not abide by pronouns. They will not accept it at all. They won't respect it, and they poke fun at it. And I think the main thing to take away from this video is just that we can't allow this to just be a subject that is so heavily argued upon. I think there's no reason to not allow it. I think there's no reason to not have gender neutral bathrooms. I don't think there's any reason for us to have so many transgender people or non-binary people be killed every single year. It's ridiculous how ignorant the society is, even though we play a guise that we're not, that we have pride every single year. And there's so many different places that, yes, everyone's accepting where I am. I'm lucky to be in New York, and most people are accepting of me, but it's not like that for everywhere in the United States. It's not like that for the whole world at all. And it's such a pressing matter that unless we talk about it and try to keep discussing it and try to inform people about it, we're never going to be able to get to the breaking point where male and female doesn't matter. It's just you that matters.